everyone, and welcome back to Alma Live. We're having these live conversations on emotional resilience, how different people define it, and what are the experiences that taught us these skills. I am so excited to have Lainie Liberti with us today, and we're actually just a few hours away down in the Yucatan. So Lainie, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here and talking about a topic that is so close to my experience and heart.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is what I want everyone listening to know is Lainie's an author, she's an advocate, and she's a world traveler. And I was telling her just before we went live that when 5 years ago, when we were packing up, when we were listing everything on Craigslist, when we were making plans to leave the US with our 2 babies and head to Mexico, I didn't know that there were communities. I didn't know there were people like Lainie in the world. I just knew that I had been this girl who traveled in her 20s, and I got too accustomed to another way of living to ever be excited about the American dream. But as soon as we got to Mexico, we bumped into a Canadian family that was like, oh, you should meet Lainie in her Facebook group. And there's thousands of families who do this. And when I landed in your group, Lainie, I mean, it gave me so much strength to see we're not the only people who want to do life differently, who want to raise our children differently, who love the idea and really have it in our hearts that the world is our home. And so thank you for what you've created, for what you trailblazed.
Thank you. I so appreciate your words. You know, I've been in, I'll tell you a little bit about my journey, but I've been at it. I'm about ready to start on my 12th year, and I've raised my son. He's been out of the country and living this lifestyle, and I'll tell you about what that means. Longer than he lived a conventional life. More than half of his life, he's been traveling and living as a world schooler. But when I started, there was no community or no support system. And I've created what I wish I had. And so in order to create a community, and we'll talk about the value of community in a little bit too, it comes from a very personal place. It comes from a place of fulfilling a need that I had when we first started traveling. And so the benefits are just massive. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I would love for you to tell us, obviously there's a lot of definitions of emotional resilience. What does that look like for you? And I'd love for those of you who are watching to let us know in the comments. Karen Ricks is on. She says, good afternoon from Albania.
Hi, Karen. So emotional resilience, the ability to have the flexibility to really process and deal with the situation, the outer world situation, and process it through the inner worlds and make sense of it. And a lot of that has to do with not only brain development, right? We've got an easy way of processing, or a very straightforward way of processing and making sense of the world around us, but also the emotional intelligence. Do we have words to put that to? Do we understand what that means? And then the idea of being flexible enough to put that in its place and make sense of it. Now, there's so much that goes along with that. There's attachment. Are you attached to that reaction or that emotion? Do you have a story or a thought that, this has traveled down these neural pathways and it triggers some meaning that you gave to it 20 years ago and now it means this? To have the awareness of all of these things that are happening at the same time and be present, right? Being the watcher of the reaction instead of becoming the reaction. And then having the flexibility to make a choice on how we're going to actually proceed. So if we're in reaction mode, then we're reacting on an old story. And that's not true emotional resilience, right? I mean, you're not really being flexible and processing in a way that serves you. Some people would give it totally different definition, but for me, this is what feels most true. And I want to talk about what that looks like, and how that relates to self, and self related to community. And the first community that I'd like to talk about is the community of family culture. The emotional intelligence is something that is a tool that all families benefit from, right? And that comes from the parents modeling it, to encouraging the children to have the ability to put words to what it is that they're feeling and how they're reacting. And it's quite normal for children to be in a reactive state when something doesn't go their way, or, it's a tough decision, or, something is frightening to them. It's very normal to be in reaction. And to have the parents' emotional intelligence to be aware in that moment, to instead of react with the child, but to support the child, see the child, hear the child, and make sure that the child is secure by taking a breath and allowing the children to take a breath. Now we've created a relationship that can build emotional resilience in the family unit, because we've got the language to talk about it. We've got the practice of not being in reactive mode, or understanding that when we are in reactive mode, that's where we are. And so those things are all tied together, and the foundation of self, understanding emotional intelligence, and then you can't have emotional resilience without the intelligence, right? And then modeling that and supporting our children, and then creating a relationship where the whole family is emotionally resilient because of that practice and knowledge and, approach. I hope that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I love that. Just yesterday, when we woke up in the house, you could feel it was a little bit heavier, right? Everything had been sort of cruising along good and well. And I don't think the boys had really noticed too many differences. But yesterday morning, there was this heaviness, and one of my boys sort of withdrew, and the other one sort of started bouncing, right? And I decided to do this, like, see if they could give a word to it, right? And I was so in awe when my little one said, "Mom, I feel lonely." Because we usually go do a lot of things. We usually get to see a lot of people. And then he said something that I thought was interesting, because it had not come up at all. Is he said, "And I don't know why we're not doing that anymore." And it was so interesting, because he was able to communicate that. Then I could know, oh, even though certain things have been said, it was not the language that answered that question for him. And so I love what you're saying, because if we're strong together as a family, if there's emotional resilience as a unit, that's really where the beauty and the power is. So, how did you learn this? What was the catalyst for you?
In our personal story, 2008, the economy crashed. I mean, I'm taking it from here's where we started and why there was such a need for it. A lot led up to that, and I wrote about it in the book that's coming out today, actually. But what happened was, at the time, my son was 9 years old. And I had listened to him say to me over and over, "Mom, you never spend any time with me." And I heard those words. And I really wanted to make a change. And when the economy crashed, and I knew I wasn't bringing I owned an agency at the time, and when I knew I wasn't bringing my staff back, all I wanted to do was to listen to the words that he said to me and figure out a way that he would never say those words again. And so I pitched an idea. I said, let's go have an adventure. Let's go see the world. Let's go put backpacks on and go travel. And he's like, I am so in. I'm up for that. So that was 12 years ago, or 11 years. We're starting on our 12th year very soon. And that sort of external choice gave us the fuel and insight for all the internal stuff that unfolded as a result. So before we set out, I said to him, I want to be your partner. Let's do this in partnership. And that was the language that we used. So in order to have partnership, here are the things that we need to do. We need to always say what's on our mind. We always must say what we're feeling. And that goes for fear, all the way across the spectrum to joy and love and all that other stuff. Because we were pretty good about talking about that. But the fear and the intuition and, those sparks of insight that we get, not many people have practiced doing that, because in modern culture, we don't value that. We don't value intuition. We don't value inspiration. It tends to be more on the practical. So we talked a lot about that. And so the idea of being in partnership from communication perspective, we did it from a money perspective. The money that we had for our trip was our money. Here's the bank card information. Here's where everything is. I'm saying this to a 9-10-year-old. So this is the partnership. Like, I was walking the walk, right? Every decision that we made had to be the two of us, right? This was a brand new way of being, an entirely different way of being. And I know those that have partners that are husbands or wives, that's what that situation looks like. But to have this sort of partnership with a child, some critics may say, don't do that, But for me, from an intuition perspective, having this foundation of partnership heading out felt really, really good. So we started with that. And that foundation of having that partnership really encouraged us to be aware of the inner worlds. And that encouraged us to, especially from my perspective, to be vulnerable and authentic and show my fallibilities, to show, I'm scared or I am doubting that I made the right decision. And we were both able to stand up and show up for one another. And again, I know there may be some critics saying that's a lot of pressure to put on a 10-year-old. We were 10 when he left. He had the emotional intelligence to be able to do it because he was empowered to do so. I mean, obviously, I didn't make him the bearer of my emotional well-being. That is my responsibility. But in terms of processing the outer worlds and everything in the outer worlds were new. It was brand new for us. We were in different flavors, different languages, different sites, different ways of being. I mean, we no longer had this 2,000 square foot loft filled with every toy and, everything imaginable. Like, I had stuff, I had a lot of stuff. And to go from being the owner of all this stuff to just what we can carry on our backs is also, a challenge in terms of processing. And, the conversations that we had were about, well, what do we need now? What is a preference? A preference looks different than a need. When we had all that stuff, that was a preference for that time. And now we have the option to choose another preference. And how does that feel? Does that feel right for us? And so constantly having these conversations back and forth as we made a step in in one direction. And that's part of what we started to develop as what we called our family culture, because it came from a background of branding. Like I knew all of the how to build a brand, what the brand values are, like all the brand story, brand attributes, what's your value proposition. I know all this stuff. I did this for 20 years. But I took some of that knowledge, and before Miro and I set out, we listed our 5 family values. What were the things that we were going to build our ethos around? What were the things that were important to us? And every year we reviewed them and we adjusted them, because they were no longer part of what our family story was anymore. We felt something else was more important, or we merged that with another idea that sort of contextualized or made the value itself a little richer and more meaningful to us. So that was one of the things that we did. This helped us create emotional resilience, because again, that emotional intelligence and that awareness and the communication about the feeling and the responsibility of the inner worlds as it reflected from the changes in the outer worlds gave us all of that as our foundation. So how did we learn it? It was very intentional. We were very intentional about creating our family culture, what that involved, the partnership paradigm that we still function on today as co-business owners. I have a business partnership with a 21-year-old man now. It's set him off on his path. I mean, he's got a beautiful girlfriend that they have an amazing communication, because this is the foundation that he was raised with. He understands what the accountability for oneself is. He understands how to listen. He understands what active listening looks like, and he understands how to process his own emotions. The other thing that I think uniquely this life gave us was the ability to be flexible. And when I start talking about emotional resilience and emotional awareness from our small family unit, those are the things that when we bring it out to, I work with teens and I work with families. And when I work with teens, when you empower teens to talk about their emotional intelligence and actually give them the respect and show up for them and listen to them, that's quite rich in a world where they haven't done that. You bring that to the outer community. For me, I build communities with families around the movement of world schooling. And there's a lot of work to do in there sometimes, because we're coming at it from all different worldviews and different perspectives. But to have that foundation of showing up, respect, and building our group ethos together in a co-creative process has been powerful. And then the goal, if you can do that with 5,000, 10,000, 20, 30,000 people, you could bring that into the world. And that to me is the power behind emotional resilience, emotional intelligence, community, reflection, listening, showing up, all the stuff that I've been talking about.
So beautiful, Lainie. And I have to say this. In the work that I do, I have worked with a lot of women. And I would have to say that most of the challenges, when the big challenges come up in their business or their own internal work, goes back to that lack of partnership in their family, whether it's with their spouse or their children. So what would your recommendation be for someone who might be listening and going, oh my God, like I love it, I hear you, but I have never been in that kind of partnership. What is the first step if you realize, oh my God, I've been married for 5, 10, 30 years and that partnership and everything you just described isn't there? How do you go toward that?
Well, the first thing is you've got to get your family on board, and there's got to be that intrinsic motivation from everybody. So if one member of the family says, this is not working, and here's my proposal on how to make this work. Let's make this work by focusing on articulating, defining, and building a family culture that works for everybody. And as soon as everybody is on board, but they can't be forced to do it, because if there's an extrinsic motivation, and that's just like learning. I'm also an advocate for alternative education, and I say the same thing about that. The motivation has to come from within. And if the family is connected enough to say, yeah, this is something that I want, or yes, I'm going to go along with this because I can see the value. I can't exactly picture what she's talking about or what he's talking about, but I'm going to go along with it because I want to. This is important to me. So that's the first step. The second step, I think there's like 3 or 4 steps that you need to start defining your family values, your family culture. And after everybody's all in, right? All in, like you're playing poker and you're putting all your chips all in. You've got to have that, even from the kids. All in. You've got to decide how your family dynamics are going to define and make decisions. Is this family going, are the decisions that are going to be made, are we going to use an authoritarian paradigm? If we do, that means 1 or 2 people get to make the rules and everybody else listens. If that's agreed upon, which it probably won't be by everybody, then you move forward with an authoritarian paradigm. Are you going to use a democratic paradigm? Democratic means majority wins. We talk about it, we vote, but that also means somebody's voice doesn't get heard. Or the third option is, are we going to use consensus? And that takes a lot of work. Now, that's obviously with 2 people. Miro and I use consensus, but we took this philosophy into our teen retreats, which is our business through Project World School. And we use consensus. And to get 15 teenagers to agree to what to do every day and how to move forward takes work. Right? But it also takes practice. So our teen retreats, I know it can be done, especially with, what people are saying the most difficult age group to work with. I don't think so. But it can be done. And it takes practice, and it takes respect, and it takes all of those, what we call the soft skills, right? Collaboration, cooperation, negotiation sometimes. Sometimes you need to take a step back and compromise. Sometimes you need to stand up for what you really believe in. But if we've already agreed that the manner in which we're going to make a decision is based on consensus, then you got your work cut out. And as long as everybody's all in, committed to that, moving forward, that works. Consensus works. So again, do you want to design a family culture? And if that's yes, the second one is the manner in which you're going to make decisions, define that. Then the third one is going to be define what your 5 family values are. What are the things that are important to your family? And do a big brainstorm. Put it on a big board. Just mind map it. If you don't know how to mind map, just look it up. It's super easy. Mind map it. It's a great process, and it gets everybody participating, and it's an incredible way of getting ideas out. And then mark, what's most important from 1 to 10, and then kind of whittle it down. And then once you've got your 5 values, then you could talk about how are we going to, make a decision on how are we going to do what is the manner in which we're going to articulate our family culture, right? For our teen retreats, we do an evening circle. And each evening we come together, we, make sure everybody puts their phone down, we take a deep breath, we open the circle, and there's an intention involved in that. Family culture, you could decide what that looks like, whether it's every night, every morning, once a week, twice a week, once a month, family meeting, you can call it whatever you want. I like the idea of circle because it comes from the First Nations people, and there's a lot of history of sitting in council in circles, and some people do it with a talking stick, and you could spend hours diving into a deep rabbit hole about learning about sitting in circle and the circle council. But the way that we ended up doing it, and it's been refined over the past 7 years that we've been doing Project World School, is every night we do circle. And we open the circle, we start off with announcements for the next day. And then we, it's the same idea of giving the talking stick. Does anybody have anything that they wish to share before we start? And then it's always about listening, not reacting, about listening. And then the first question we use is, what worked today? So it's a way of reflecting on what were the great things about the day. What can I focus on that really lit me up, that really got me excited? And we acknowledge, again, it's not really a conversation. It's just, it's just a sharing, right? It's not, at that point, not a conversation. Some retreats, we find that going in an order works. We find that, popcorn style, which means one person throws something in, and after they're finished speaking, another person speaks. So each group has their own dynamic, and each family can sort of feel what feels best for them. And then after what worked, we give attention to what didn't work. And some of the things that come up are things that sometimes we didn't realize didn't work. I said something and that really triggered somebody in the wrong way, and I need to hear that, right? Or somebody else did. Somebody else said something, or the big obvious ones where we missed our bus, or that didn't work. So sometimes it's external things from the outer worlds. Sometimes it's spawned from the inner worlds, and both are encouraged and both are important. And again, we're talking building up to emotional resilience in a group, right? After that, we talk, I designed Miro and I actually designed a set of cards, 200 cards, and they're questions. So a lot of them are questions that deal with sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Questions that deal with worldviews, like how are people in our host country seeing this particular thing, and how is that different? So like 1/3 of them are worldviews. Another third of them are sort of philosophical questions. And the last third are noticing something about yourself or about somebody else about the day. And so it's a deeper reflection of the day. So we've almost 200 cards. We've cycled in and out, we've cycled out the ones that haven't worked and put new ones in from the request of our teens and so forth. But this, we always end the circle with our cards. And that is kind of, you pass around the bag and everybody pulls a card, reads it. And it's kind of a fun way to see where everybody is. And if they've already answered the philosophical one, like what is the nature of time? Like that, the teens love that one, right? If they've already answered that, they pick a new one. But a lot of the cards are about what's happening now. And so to reflect on now, today, where I am now, and to be in an active listening position. Again, we're all practicing the co-creation, the cooperation. We're all practicing our own emotional intelligence. We're all supporting supporting and being supported, there's so much value to that. So again, coming from a family of 2 people, Miro and I, it looks very different in terms of doing our family culture than doing it with a group of teens. But depending on the size of your family, you need to just figure out what works for you. So sort of to sum that up, or to just go over again, all in, the manner in which you're going to make decisions, what your family values are, and then review that, make a time, make an agreement to review that, and then figuring out how you're going to actively practice your family culture. And those things are super, super important. And I hope that creates some value.
Oh yeah, that's incredible. I love this process that you just described. And you had told me before we started that you're doing some things right now in your Facebook group to support world schoolers right now, to support travelers, because as we were talking about, we're sort of used to being free to roam. And so tell a little bit about what's going on in your group and why people should join.
Well, the Facebook community is really the online version of, and our sanctuary of our community. But the real idea is to meet in the world. And we have been meeting in the world through another project, which is the Family Summits. But the group itself has become the sanctuary. And so that's where we go to get our information. And the group itself served a different purpose up until 2 months ago. 2 months ago, so the first thing that I did is I organized a town hall meeting. Let's all jump on Zoom. Here's the time that we're going to do it. Anybody who wants to come, and we had like 30 people come. I had an agenda. I posted the agenda. What's important to our group? Where should we put the posts? What shall we roll out in order to support the group? What are the group's main goals or intentions? What are the values? All of the things that I talk about from our small family culture, and I'm bringing that into a group culture. And we had many people contribute. We've got 8,000 people in the group now. And of course, we didn't have a town hall meeting with 8,000 people, just a small few, 30 people. And then we posted it. It streamed live in our group. And then, of course, people were commenting, and then a lot of people in different time zones watched and also commented. And what we decided as a group was our value was to support our community who are uniquely feeling the restrictions in such a way that, everybody's feeling it, right? These are times of uncertainty, but to talk to a group of 8,000 people that are accustomed to roaming the planet with freedom, we know there's privilege with that, but in this moment, we're feeling like a good part of our core values and our core being is being cut off. And somebody from our home community may not understand the same kind of feeling that we're feeling right now. We all feel that we're being restricted, but what does that mean to a world schooler? I, like you, am in a country right now that is not my home country, but that was a choice that we made because we don't have a home to go to in the United States. So staying where we were or where we are is also a choice, and probably the only choice that we could make. So there are a lot of things that are very different than those that live a conventional life to those that are world schoolers and travelers. So the decision to make our group a sanctuary and really serve our group became the foremost priority. And so some of the things that we've done, every week I do a check-in and I give us a summary of what happened the week before, and I talk about what's coming up for the next week. I've done a whole mental health series where I've created, we've created these permanent threads now in our group. One of them is a mental health thread, and we've asked anybody who works in mental health in our community to post resources and post their information. If there's any way that they can help or support our community, put it on there. We also have a thread for learning resources, because suddenly there's an outburst of online learning resources. We have a thread for virtual exploration and virtual spaces. And so we're archiving all of these incredible resources. But going back to the mental health thread, from there, I noticed that we had 10 or 20 different mental health workers in our group. So I started a mental health series where I interviewed them. And a lot of them I interviewed in their native language and English. So I've got psychologists talking in Dutch and then answering the same question in English, because I don't know who was Dutch in our group, but they needed to hear it in that language. Or we also have, English, French, depending on the person. I have an interview in German. I have an interview English, German, an interview in Danish as well. So depending on where the originating language or first language is from the person who was being interviewed, they answered in both languages. So whatever I could do from the mental health perspective to serve the community, all of those interviews are up, and I interviewed people from different perspectives. We've got psychologists and family therapists, and we've got a Chinese medicine practitioner. We've got a mindfulness coach. We have a woman who teaches about inner peace. We have all different perspectives on how to help our children and how to do self-care. So that's one of the resources. We are also doing, so one of the things that we agreed on is we're not social distancing. We are physically distancing. And so socially, we need that connection. And so every week I've been hosting a women's circle, and that's been happening for 5 weeks now. And they're so much fun. Everybody that joins they look forward to it this is the highlight of their week. We also have virtual book club, both for kids and for adults. We also have a writers group for the teens and tweens, and they're doing writing prompts. What else are we doing in there? We have a World Schooling Education live interview that happens once a week about the focus of education. And then I'm always and then we also have World Scholar Spotlight, where people that are locked down in different places in the world, I've been interviewing them about what it's like to be there. So I interviewed an Italian in Nepal. I interviewed Americans in Malaysia. I interviewed people from all over the world. And it's just really fascinating to have our community come together. Also, Karen, one of our moderators, did a live cooking lesson. Like, we learned how to make flatbread. And so the World Scholars logged in, and here we are. She's an Albanian, she's an American, and she's making naan. Or if you want to make tortillas, make tortillas. But we're doing this together. And so there's that sense of we are coming together, and we have created a sanctuary for us. And it's the most incredible socially connecting space ever. But it comes with that communication. Like, we used our town hall. It comes with that emotional resilience. Like, how flexible can we be? We have to honor different people's perspectives, especially like with mental health stuff, right? Everybody's going to hear it differently, and they need to hear different bits of information because that's meaningful to them. We come at it from cooperation, collaboration, all of those things that I think we start with ourselves. And I know you've got a lot of interviews, or will be interviewing a lot of people about emotional resilience and self-awareness from the single person. I'm taking that information, bringing it to the family, and then bringing it to smaller groups, and then bringing it to our community. And if us as community can bring that out to the greater world, I don't know if you can see my hands are getting bigger, bigger, and bigger. That, to me, the goal is that we are co-creating a more peaceful planet. If we can understand how to relate to one another, that's the path to peace.
Mm, mm, yes. And that is, that's a beautiful place to be, right? That's a beautiful world to live in and to raise our children in. So, Lady, I know that people are going to want to learn more about you. Where should they go to find out more about the work that you do?
Well, if you're on Facebook, please do, as you said, join us on the We Are World Schoolers group. You are welcome there. The work that I do, my son and I co-created, co-founded, and co-facilitate Project World School, which is a series of teen retreats around the world. Right now, we're supposed, what month is this? We're in April. Right now, we're supposed to be in Japan with a group of teens. Obviously, that didn't happen. Next month, and probably just a week, we're supposed to be with another group of teens in Europe. And in fact, the theme for our Europe retreat, which has been canceled, and hopefully we'll be able to do it next year, the theme is human resilience. And we were traveling with a group of teens, starting in Berlin, going through all of Poland and exploring, Poland has some incredible history. And then after Poland and going to Auschwitz and, exploring World War II, but even before that, there's some incredible human resilience because Poland is a country that disappeared. It didn't exist for a period of, I can't remember, 60 years or so, got absorbed into the Habsburg dynasty, the empire. And then from there, we were supposed to end our trip in Budapest. And so that's not happening in May either. We're hoping that through our next trip is the Peru trip, exploring the ancient cultures of Peru, Incas and earlier, and going to Machu Picchu. That's supposed to take place in July. If we need to, we can move it to August or September. So that hopefully, fingers crossed for us, that will happen. And then in October, we might even move it to November. We're supposed to be in Vietnam. And twice a year, Miro and I host a family summit. So what I just explained was the Project World School Teen Retreats, which is our core business. The Project World School Family Summits are twice a year summits that take place here in Mexico in the spring. And we chose Mexico in the spring because it's closer to the United States. And so those that are just starting out or coming from the United States, they have, they can dip their toe into what is community, what is travel, what is world schooling. And they could do that in the safety of our 5-day retreat, 5-day summit, which is a conference style gathering for families. And then in the fall, we alternate every year between Europe and Asia. So last year we were in Spain, the year before that we were in Thailand, and then we're scheduled to go back to Vietnam in the fall. So fingers crossed all that happens, so that Project World School, you can find all of our information, even about the summit and the links to the summit from Project World School. And if anybody has any questions about anything world schooling related, feel free to reach out to me.
I love it. I want to leave everyone with this quote that you had shared with me. Get comfortable stepping outside your comfort zone and into the stretch zone. We're all stretching, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for being with me today, Lainie. This has been incredibly useful, valuable, what you're doing in the world. For those of you who are watching, I would love for you to leave your comments. Thank you, Karen Ricks, for your input. We appreciate you joining us. Until next time, stay well. Big hugs from Mexico. Bye.